Well, very good afternoon. Please be welcome to this webinar, the FAI AS9100 as a powerful tool for supply chain management. For those who are happen to very not to know Costa Rica as a destiny for this type of industry, I would like to preview several facts regarding our country. First of all, I wanted to let you know that Costa Rica by 2019 was able to export over $21 billion to the different destinations. Uh, 41% of our export are, the main destination is United States, and also this is very important to remark. Why is that? Costa Rica has a history of no army, and it's been accosted with over more than 60 universities that help us to reinforce that aim for education that the Costa Rican has. So that helps in terms of talent, it's very important for the audience to note that Costa Rica it has that increasing value in different fields of the production regarding these products. Regarding goods, we came up from the early 80s with the makeup services as a hub to an assembly and advanced manufacturer to finally to an engineer and design hub, which is the industry that we're facing right now. In terms of services, again, we started with back offices, then with contact centers, shared services, and data analysis, which is the type of industry that we are doing and having right now. Also, I want to mention beside this fact that I just mentioned that I would like to audience to be a part of our Biostrade mission that is going to be taking place virtually for the first time between the 19th and the 23rd of October. So, going specific to the facts that join us today throughout this presentation, I want to mention that new product introduction and product transfer in the aerospace industry is usually a slow and costly process. First article inspection, as established in the AS 9100 standard, should be determined as a planning process that goes beyond filling the applicable formats. FAI development should be systematized within the quality system to establish the new production information in different stages to assure not only to be within requirements, but to confirm as well that the product transfer is fully aligned to the internal quality systems. Aligning these methods with the supply chain will have a direct impact and benefits in the product transfer that will immediately be perceived by the customer. Time reductions in inspection techniques, fixturing development, and downstream in the paperwork is part of the benefits of establishing this planning process. New product lead times can be reduced over 25%. In this webinar, you will find the basic details of making your first article inspection process as a process to control and manage your supply chain. Being that said, I would like to transfer the word to our expert, Mr. Esteban Carrillo, who happens to be the cluster manager of the Crack Aerospace cluster. So I want to transfer the word so you can enjoy his presentation. Be welcome, Esteban.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Zacharias, for the introduction. I'm very pleased to be here today in this sharing of knowledge activity that we have related to the aerospace industry. So the webinar is a little bit short. So hopefully within this simple approach, we can give you a value added to your organization, and in case you want to explore more, we're willing to support any type of support within any operation. So maybe just to give a small overview of my background, of why I'm actually here giving out this presentation. As Zachariah explained, I'm the cluster manager for the Costa Rica Aerospace Cluster. We are a group of 34 companies involved in the aerospace industry here in Costa Rica. I have 14 years of experience in the aerospace industry, The majority of them on the quality section. I initiated on manufacturing, and my technical expertise is pretty much cable and harness assemblies, PC boards. I have several process certification. I'm certified IPC trainer per J standard 001. I also have process certification for crimping according to NASA requirements for ESD, torque, related to process specification. My biggest achievement was to lead the AS9100 and NatCap implementation here in Costa Rica for the first time. That was actually back in 2015. Today, right now, we have 12 aerospace certification here in Costa Rica, combined between AS9100 and NatCap, special processing, focus on chemical processing. So I was able to lead 9 of those 12 efforts here in Costa Rica. I'm also BSI trainer for AS9100 for Latin America. The course is Provita certified, and I'm providing the lead auditor training for them. I also, in my quality background, I was also involved in the transfer of more than 10 production lines from the US to Costa Rica of a complexity of more than 500 different products. So I pretty much have a lot of experience in first article inspection developments. There's a lot of lessons learned, and the idea is to share a little bit of that experience with all the participants here. I've been cluster manager since 2018. This is an initiative that was, let's say, established by Procomer. That is the promoter of external commerce here in Costa Rica. And we've been able to achieve the prize for the best cluster, for the best management within 2018 and 2019. So I lead the transfer of knowledge in terms of aerospace industry here in Costa Rica, and I'm leading the setting up the strategic planning and growth for the aerospace industry in Costa Rica. Okay, the webinar today, let's say it's kind of short. The idea is not, let's say, not to focus on the, let's say, on the requirements of AS9102 as the standard that it's being used for guidelines for for the first article inspection developments. But the idea is to focus today more on the application. Okay, how do we can apply the first article inspection methodology within the supply chain? So the presentation is being established in 5 different sections. We're gonna talk initially about the first article inspection, the background and the context, how the standard is written, what's the intent of the standard, and how it's being applied regularly within the aerospace supply chain. We're gonna analyze the first article inspection within a process approach. We're gonna establish some stages, and we're going to, let's set up, propose some control records. So the idea is to, within half an hour, to be able to provide you, let's say, within a very single approach, how can you be able to impact your supply chain, and eventually some, let's say, success stories of how we have handled this here in Costa Rica. Okay. First of all, we need to, let's say, clarify that we know that AS9100 is the quality system standard for aerospace. You can certify your company on AS9100. However, AS9102 is a reference standard. Okay, you cannot certify your company on AS9102. This is a reference standard. This is like a guidance for you to execute a process. So we've started talking about AS9100 itself. I'm pointing out a small screenshot of the standard about section 8513, product process verification. And I think that me as a quality guy, in this case, you have to go through within the small letters. Okay, if you read actually the standard, it's a little bit short on how we can actually apply the first article inspection itself. If you read the statement for the requirement, what it states is that the organization should establish process verification activities, okay? When they refer activities, doesn't explicitly recall for you to establish a process. And I think that's where the initial weakness is being presented of how some or a lot of the companies are applying the first article inspection as activities or isolated activities, and they're not applying it as a process itself. If you read AS9100, there's a reference to the first article inspection process. However, there is no reference to AS9102 as a requirement to be fulfilled. So you can actually see, and it's very common for, let's say, within quality clauses, and when you downflow requirements to your suppliers, you all the times will see that you are requested to do the first article inspection per AS9102, but are the companies really doing that? Okay, and I believe that's where the biggest change in the approach that we want to present today. Okay, currently the companies are using the forms. Okay, if you go to any company and you actually go and execute an audit, all the supply chain of aerospace are using the AS9102 forms to be able to evidentiate these verification activities. Okay, but actually the AS9102 process is not being used. When you actually go and execute an audit, and when you actually go and ask for first article inspection, the usual response is, okay, give me the part number that you want to check and I'll show you the forms, okay? But with the approach that I want to give today is that the forms is part of the process. The forms is actually an output of the process. AS9102 is actually a standard in which the intent is to be used as a planning process for new product introduction, okay? So the focus today is that when we're, let's say, establishing our own internal quality clauses, and we are mandatory to flow down first article inspection requirements, the message here is not to flow down the requirements. Let's flow down the process, okay? Let's try to align not only using the forms within the supply chain, but let's standardize and let's downflow the process within the supply chain. And that's how, when you start having the benefits or having an aligned and very well developed new product development process, okay? The forms itself are only an appendix. If you actually go through the detail of AS9102, you will only see that the forms are only a very small section of the standard in which we only show the evidence of we're actually accomplishing and executing, okay? So the biggest change is for us to actually start seeing the first article inspection within a process approach, okay? And we have to see the AS9102 as a process for two main things, okay? New product introduction and change management, okay? Those are like the two main focal points of AS9102 as a methodology, as a process in which we're gonna have inputs, we're gonna have outputs, and we're gonna have all the elements established in a process. So what we're going to do today is set up a very small process approach scenario for a first article inspection, and we're gonna establish, let's say, some control records for you to be able to downstream the process, to downflow within your supply chain, and to have direct impact in your organization, okay? So this is a classic and very simple turtle diagram, okay? We have inputs, outputs, and we have all the elements in place that we need to develop a process, okay? When we're talking about a first article inspection process, we have a lot of inputs, okay? We have contracts, we have the production orders, we have quality clauses, okay? We have engineering drawings, and not only related to the product. We can have also drawings related to fixtures. We can also have drawings related to wiring schematics for testing. So we have all the different type of, let's say, technical documentation associated to the product. We may have different type of standards, especially if we're talking about special processing. We may have sourcing requirements in case we have source control items. So we may have some guidelines in terms of how the supply chain for the product should be established, okay? When we mention with what, okay, of course we need calibrated measuring equipment, okay, that's usually very common. A lot of people ask me, okay, do you need a software in order to be able to manage the first article inspection process? The answer is no. You can easily manage, and the idea of today is to give you some tools, let's say, economic tools that you can actually, with a couple of Excel spreadsheet, you can easily have a very robust control process, okay? So a software in order to manage this is not necessary. Of course, it's going to make your life easier, but it's not necessary. So who? And this is also another change in let's say, the traditional focus of the first article inspection process. We need a group of let's say, a different type of parties within the company. Ideally, you should involve at least your inspection, quality, production, and purchasing personnel, okay? Because there's a lot of requirements involved in the process, and we need to downstream all these within a single process. Within the execution, okay, within the execution, we need to take into account the identification of the parts, the accountability. We need to verify that the competence of the people assigned to the work it's actually being effective in order to achieve the outputs, okay? The outputs, and as I told you, the forms is only one of the outputs that we have related to the process, is not the process itself, okay? And that's one of the biggest mindsets that we need to change, is that the first article inspection is not the 3 forms that we have in place. The forms is just one single output of the process, okay? We also have some internal records, we will have certificate of compliance, and of course, we will have the product itself, okay? And on the how, okay, on the how, we need to have a procedure in place, and actually this total diagram can set up the basic elements of your internal procedure, and we need to have control records, okay? So we're gonna propose today a very simple approach of using some very single control records in order for you to structure your first article inspection process and being able to downflow that within your supply chain, okay? And the criteria, what type of elements can we, let's say, measure? We can establish KPIs for our process, so we can have the first pass yield, we can establish time limits, or we can even measure documentation accuracy, because usually documentation, it's a little bit of a nightmare when we start, let's say, getting more depth into this process, okay? So by having this being laying it out within the first article inspection process, then the whole activity start to take some structure. And the approach that I want to give today is the most simple, the easiest for you to implement within your company, okay? And the proposal is for you to downstream this within 3 different stages, okay? And what are these 3 different stages? Of course, before, during, and after production, okay? So if the intent of the standard is being a planning process, so eventually there should be some activities that you need to confirm before you actually start producing your parts, okay? And this is where actually you need to start identify what are the key elements that you need to integrate into your process. This actually could also be used as a lesson learned activity in which anytime you have any type of problem within project management, any problem within new product introduction, you can actually go back to these requirements and try to reformulate them again, okay? This is just a list of examples of things that you should, let's say, question yourself before you actually put or release a first article inspection order into the production floor, okay? Some of the key elements that you should take into account, okay? Were the quality clauses analyzed, okay? And this is like the small letters of the contract. So really be careful on try to understand very well your customer requirements, okay? This is a key element because at the end, then you need to downflow these requirements within your supply chain, okay? Then are the drawings controlled as part of the configuration management process? So you need to make sure that the configuration control of the part is being aligned to your internal requirements since the beginning of the process, okay? If there are fixtures involved, other fixtures require design and validated. And this is a key element of how you can actually reduce lead times and cost based on the experience that we had so far here in Costa Rica. And we're gonna talk about that later, a little bit later on the presentation today. Are the applicable standards available for expression processing? Are the applicable standards not only available, but well understood, especially for periodic and lot testing, which may be some key elements for you to pay attention? Is there transfer of work involved? And in case it is, the AS9100 requires you to do a risk analysis in case transfer of work is involved. And this is something you need to identify and manage before you actually release the part into production. Are any source control items identified within the bill of materials of the part? Are any key characteristics identified of the product? And it also can be combined if you are, let's say, assigning the responsibility of a key characteristic to a supplier, okay? The inspection sequence is being established, and this is one of the key elements of the first article inspection planning activity, okay? Where within the process you are going to take the checkpoints, where within the process you're gonna make your records, and where within the process you need to establish your control or inspection criteria, okay? Is the inspection equipment available? Of course, this is key and basic. And where all the interested parties involved, okay? So if you can actually see from this list, there are questions related to purchasing, there are questions related to production, there are questions related to quality. So eventually, this is why we need to involve an interdisciplinary team within the company in order to be able, let's say, to release the first article inspection order into the floor, okay? If you can actually see, and maybe you are going to be seeing where I'm actually going at, you can actually set up this list of questions as a checklist in order for you to be able that you are entering the first article inspection order as establishing within your internal system and for you to be able to reduce risk within this production, okay? I put a small note back there related that you can also include ERP system requirements in terms of including the product recipe, the product identification, and so forth. So that's where it's going to start being established specifically for each of the organizations, but eventually you can include as much questions here on this section for you to be ready, okay? During the production, okay, we need to establish, of course, the identification, lot accountability, the internal documentation, development, routers, work instruction, visual aids, anything related to the product, in which we usually take the first article as the unit for us to develop all the documentation, and we also need to validate the operator competence, okay? In order, if we're going to be effective during the first article development itself, and what to control after. Okay, of course, we need to control product conformity. As outputs, we can do the completeness of form 1, 2, and 3. And if you see the webinar today, I'm not focused on how to fill the forms. I'm focusing on how to set up a process. Okay, so this is the difference in the approach of the webinar today. We need to provide ATP, supporting documentation, certificate of compliance. Packaging is a big element when you are analyzing the outputs as one of the production stages, okay? So you can actually see when you, let's say, trespass all these requirements in these 3 simple stages, before production, during production, and after production, you can actually downstream this within a single record within 3 checklists that can be integrated in one single record for you to assure that you're going to be doing the new product introduction according to your quality system requirements, okay? So you can actually set up a very simple record established in 3 different stages with independent requirements. So you can have a checklist per stage, and even you can have some approval per stage. You can have some designated delegates in your organization, let's say, to approve releasing, let's say, the production from stage 1 to stage 2 or from stage 2 to stage 3 accordingly, okay? So that will not so establish a sequence downstream, but will structure your first article inspection process. Having also a database is really important, especially if you are actually managing a large amount of first article inspection activity, internal. There are some companies that have departments and specific resources only for first article inspection developments. So in order for you to know what will be like the status of each of the FAI inspection processes that are being, let's say, open within the company, you should have a database for you control the status. For me, the key element is for you to know if the first article is within any of those three specific stages, if the first article is already sent to the customer waiting for approval, or if the first article is already approved by the customer. So in this way, you can actually, let's say, plan your resources, establish your follow-up activities. If you need your, let's say, explicit and formal approval from your customer, so manage that through a very simple database will make the channels of communication really simple. And also the concept of the database should be used also to communicate within your suppliers, okay? So this is just a small proposal of how you can actually, let's say, take some of the information. You can actually collect some dates if you want to, let's say, measure your, let's say, response time for first article inspection developments. If you want to record data for first piece in first pass yield, you can use this database for you to be able to manage not only your communication channels, but to manage your key process indicators, okay? And also now when you want to downstream this within your supply chain, okay? There's usually a lot of problems with paperwork. So I would strongly recommend for you to have a structured tool to provide feedback to your supplier in order to make corrections, in order to, let's say, make a request of an update of the first article inspection information that you have in your records. So I strongly recommend for you to have a record in place in order for you to provide feedback. I also recommend to have a structure within the first article inspection forms for you to be able to communicate easier and for you to be able to track down the approval process within your supply chain. So the use of the database and the status, you can also use it, let's say, upfront for the first article that you are providing to your customers and also downstreaming to your supply chain. You can also, let's say, manage the status of the first article that are being, let's say, waiting for corrections or waiting for a corrective action. So now by combining this supplier feedback record with the database, you can easily be able to communicate your first article inspection findings within the supply chain, okay? So if you see this process approach, this very single process approach, what is recommended is to divide your first article inspection process in 3 different stages and at least try to use 3 control records, okay? Want to be able to, let's say, control the process of the development itself, another one for database management, and the last one to provide communication and feedback to your supplier, okay? Now, if we already have established a process, we have a procedure in place, we have checklist in place, we have responsibilities assigned, we can have, let's say, authorization required to move into that subsequent stage of the process. So this is why within the supply chain, when you're actually applying quality clauses to your suppliers, don't downflow the forms, downflow the process. And this is like the key message of the webinar today, okay? Of course, everybody uses the forms within AS9100 requirements. All the aerospace companies are using the forms, but not everybody is using the process, okay? So the benefits of using this within the supply chain is that you're gonna have the same methods and the same processes and the same planning execution. You're gonna have the same kickoff meeting in the initial approach development on each of the members of the supply chain. Everybody will make the same question upfront before they actually release the production into the floor. So risk is going to be minimized within the full supply chain, okay? So downstreaming this process will have direct impact in your cost, in your lead times, but also if you downstream the process, not only the forms, you can also extend those benefits to your supply chain, okay? So eventually those cost reductions and those lead time reductions will also be reflected in your supply chain, okay? So a little bit of the model that we have followed here in Costa Rica. And I think that the nature of how the aerospace industry have grown here in Costa Rica has forced us to set up some strategies together in order to grow together and to be able to develop ourselves together. So the positive things about the Costa Rica supply chain in this case is that we have received training in the same first article inspection techniques. And we have done this through the Costa Rica Aerospace Cluster. So all of our members have received first article inspection training, and everybody is being trained along with the same techniques, with the same methodologies. So that's where one of the initial steps. So we have all the supply chain aligned, not only on how to fill the forms, but we have the supply chain aligned in how we want to plan a new product introduction within aerospace industry. Okay, so all the local supply chain here in Costa Rica is trained on these techniques. The last bullet point is that even though you are AS9100 or not, you receive the same training, you receive the same new product introduction process. So eventually this is not only being applied for companies that are aerospace certified, but this is being applied within the supply chain, okay? So this is make really, let's say, easier how to standardize your FAI methodologies. You can actually share or have very consolidated the amount of information. You can actually request your planning records to your suppliers, and you're gonna be sure that eventually everybody is talking in the same language. You're gonna make sure that everybody is taking all the planning activities that are required in order to, let's say, introduce that product into your system, okay? Now, one of the lessons learned or the practical benefits of how we're using this. And of course, as I told you, if you start using this, let's say, process as a lesson learned activity, you can start identify where the problems are occurring and how you can start resolving them before they actually occur. A lot of the experiences that we have here in Costa Rica is that featuring development of first article is usually a problem. Because they're on the design stages, or they can be designed from the past that they were not validated, they were changing the features. So taking a lot of provisions from a planning perspective on the featuring development, they have been broad reductions here in Costa Rica in new product developments more than between 25 and 40%. We know that aerospace developments are slow. Usually, material lead times can take up to maybe 60% of the whole process itself, but eventually we've seen a lot of, let's say, problems within the production process with featuring development that put in some provisions up front. Let's say on stage one before production, if you set up some strategies and provisions for featuring development, you can actually reduce a lot of headaches, reduce a lot of quality issues, and also reduce a lot of featuring development processes. Also having your source control management, if you have that properly downstream within your process, this can reduce a lot of lead times, because eventually this can involve a supplier approval process, and AS9100 requires a risk management when you are doing supplier approval process. So eventually putting this up front when source control items are identified can also reduce a lot of these lead times, because as I told you, material lead time is one of the biggest percentages of the full lead time of a first article inspection development. And also the quality clause analysis and downflow to requirements. So this is mandatory, or this is a key element for you to be able to set up the requirements to your supply chain and be able to release your production orders to your suppliers. So those are three elements in which here in Costa Rica, by establishing this first article inspection process, we have identified as areas that in the past give us a lot of headaches, and actually setting up some key questions on the preliminary stages of the process can reduce a lot of the problems and reduce a lot of the time that is being used to require for the product developments. And of course, it will also impact quality, okay? If you set up and downstream your featuring developments, you're gonna have less risk for you to damage a full batch of production parts. You're gonna have less risk of having non-conforming product. Also, by laying down all the quality clauses and special processing requirements, you can actually make sure that all the periodic and lot testing are being executed as required. And that's actually sometimes slightly tricky when you want to analyze the applicability of non-destructive testing, for example, in special processing. And also, you will have a very good impact in paperwork accuracy, not only because everybody is aligned in how they want to fill out the records, but because of the execution. So internally, we have seen here even more than 60% reduction of paperwork errors by downstreaming the training, by establishing a proper sequence, and by standardizing the control records that we're using within the supply chain, okay? This is a little bit of just to give you a list of the companies that we have in the aerospace cluster here in Costa Rica. Some of the companies that are using the first article inspection per AS9102, but not only the forms, the process. And this is how we have been, let's say, established the new product introduction here in Costa Rica for the aerospace industry. Once again, thank you for your time. My name is Esteban Carrillo. As I stated before, I'm cluster manager for the Costa Rica Aerospace Cluster. This was a very short seminar, but I hope that with a very single approach, with I would say a very different kind of a webinar provided to first article inspection, I didn't focus on the standard requirements itself. I didn't focus on how to fill the forms. I'll focus most on the applicability of how you can apply the standard, how you can downstream it within your process, and how to put it in place within your supply chain. So hopefully that within these approximately 40 minutes that we can give you some value added to your organization of how to apply the first article inspection within your company. If you want to have more information about the first article inspection itself, about the Costa Rica aerospace industry, you can log to our webpage, costaricaerospace.com, and there's also my email address in case you want to have further information about the growth and development of the aerospace industry here in Costa Rica. Okay, thanks a lot for the opportunity. And Zacarias, I'll give you the word again to have the closure of the webinar.
Esteban, thank you very much for that beautiful explanation regarding the AS9100 tool for the benefit of our companies. If there's any questions from the audience, we'll be more than glad to receive it at this time. If
there
not,
is one question on the chat. Yes. May I read it?
Yes, go ahead.
How many years Costa Rica has in the aerospace industry? And do you have experience in MRO?
Yeah, actually, our largest experience in aerospace is with MROs, maintenance, repair, and overhaul. One of our members and one of our, let's say, presentation cards is a company named Copesa. This is one of the largest and most well-known MROs in Latin America. They have a very well presence within airlines in the US, in Latin America, and different parts of the world. Copesa has been in the market for more than 25 years, more than 55 years, sorry. So they've been in the market for more than 55 years, and that's actually probably like the beginnings of the let's say, aerospace industry here in Costa Rica formally. Within manufacturing, we have companies that's been more than 25 or 30 years already producing for the aerospace industry. So there's quite some background in place here in Costa Rica. What's been, let's say, slightly new in the last couple of years is to have a formal certification for quality system and special processing. For MROs, yes, we have in Costa Rica. We have more than 55 years of experience with MROs. And within manufacturing, we can easily have more than 30 years producing aerospace parts here in Costa Rica.
Thank you very much. The last question is related to the mentioned event of the Buyers Trade Mission. So how can people here asking can register to the Buyers Trade Mission 2020?
I'm going to leave that answer to Zacarias that can guide them better through the process, okay?
As I mentioned earlier at the presentation, the Buyers Trade Mission is going to be taking place between the 19th and 23rd of October. Invitations will be sent to you directly to the list that we have registered. And also, this presentation is going to be posted for any inquiries that come afterwards.
Thank you very much. We have here one last question related. It indicates, what are your main exports markets in the industry? What skills sets you apart from other countries?
Okay, so in which areas does Costa Rica feel comfortable? Okay, so part of the, let's say, Costa Rica aerospace value-added proposal is that we like to focus on electromechanical systems, okay? An electromechanical system will easily integrate probably 80% of our current capabilities in terms of manufacturing, windings, PC board assemblies, machining in general, plastic injection molding, silicone molding. So electromechanical systems will actually integrate probably 80% of the capability of our members. So this is as much specific and as more generic for you to understand with what type of, let's say, product and assembly does Costa Rica feel comfortable. Costa Rica also feels comfortable with low volume and high mix. We like to specialize on labor-intensive parts, even though, for example, you can have labor-intensive machining parts if they are complex, if they may have large or different type of setups. So Costa Rica feels comfortable with electromechanicals, low volume, high mix. We also have a lot of experience with embedded software. There's one company in Costa Rica here that is very well known, has a lot of aerospace certification for embedded software development. So maybe to summarize it, electromechanical systems will be one of our strengths. Embedded software will be our second area of work, and MRO, as we already talked about COPESA, will be maybe our third working area.
Okay, sorry, but we have just one more question. Well, two more questions. Do you provide services to Tier 1 and OEMs?
Right now, Costa Rica, we are not shipping parts directly to OEMs. So we are Tier 2, Tier 3, or Tier 4, depending on the programs. Our main customers will be Tier 1s within the North America section. The closest that I think we have been for us to ship directly to an OEM is with some Boeing cables that we use, that we know that actually our customer only tests the cables and send it directly to Boeing. But right now we are not a direct source. Our direct customers are usually Tier 1 and Tier 2. In terms of aerospace, right now Costa Rica is focusing a lot in manufacturing, not necessarily on design. So that's why we are right now positioning within the supply chain, usually within Tier 2 and Tier 3. Our main customers here in Costa Rica are usually Tier 1s, that they will be the ones that will ship the product to the OEMs directly.
Esteban, thank you very much. We have one more, and I think by the time, the last question. So we have here a tendency of other sectors related to similar technologies, for example, from the sector of medical devices. So here's an interesting question. Can this tool be applied as well to a medical devices industry?
Sure, and actually one of the last statements that I give on the Costa Rica model is that we have given training to companies that are not only AS9100 certified, but they are ISO 9001. And actually, I don't see this as an aerospace methodology itself. I see it as good practices for your product introduction. So the answer is yes, you can easily, and I strongly recommend for you to set up this structure and this process to any type of product, no matter to which industry it belongs. This is, I usually explain to everybody that standards are good practices that are just trying to be standardized within organizations, but these are good practices. So eventually you can apply these within medical devices and within any different sector. Exactly, good practices, you can actually apply it all over your organization for sure.
That's great to hear. Thank you very much. No more questions on the chat. So Zacarias, I'll give you the word for the closure.
Thank you all for being a part of this webinar today. Thank you, Esteban, and thank you all the audience. As I mentioned before, this presentation will be posted in our social network, and you'll be hearing from us in the next days for your participation in our buyer's trade mission. Thank you very much for being part of this presentation today, and very good afternoon.